Hello, everyone. Excited for you all to be here at PAX Online, our PAX summer camp. I am so excited to be here with my team to be discussing our research report where we did a study on the mental health of streamers during COVID-19. And this is the first time we've talked publicly about our research and what we found. And we're super stoked to be able to share that with you all. So who are we? Well, first off, my name is Dr. Kelly Dunlap. I am a licensed and practicing clinical psychologist. I'm also a game designer and an adjunct professor of game design at American University. And I am also the community manager for Take This, which is a mental health nonprofit dedicated to the well-being of game players and game developers. You may know us from our PAX appearances with the AFK room, or you may know Dr. B, who I know has another panel during PAX as well. And so I'm going to let my wonderful colleagues introduce themselves as well.
I'm going to take that as a cue. All right.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry. Hi, everyone. My name is Mxiety. I am a mental health advocate, Take This ambassador, also a researcher now, and things that I'm totally forgetting. But I'm really, really excited to be here. I'm excited that I got a chance to be part of this and to chat with the community about the community and streamers and their communities about what is important to them when it comes to COVID and mental health.
And I am Jocelyn Wagner. I am an MFA candidate in the Games and Interactive Media program at American University. I'm also a casual Twitch streamer, so I do stream occasionally. And I, like both of my colleagues, am very excited about talking about this project and what we found.
And one of the things that I love about this project so much from the beginning is that all of us stream. So, Jocelyn, casual streamer. I currently am a casual, I think 2 times a month now stream with Take This, but previously was doing esports casting, 3 to 4 times a week back in my previous life. And of course, like a mental health streaming goddess, and streaming multiple times a week, has an amazing following. If you don't follow her, you definitely should. You should just go do that right now. Just take a break and go do that. And the reason that I'm so excited about this is one of the challenges in mental health research is that, especially around things like streaming and games, you're usually having researchers who have no idea about the community that they're researching. That's how you get, video game moral panic around things like violence, because you have researchers comparing an M-rated game to a T-rated game, or a first-person shooter to a third-person shooter. Whereas a gamer, that those two things are not comparable. But if you don't know the community, if you're not like grounded in the community that you're researching, you're so much more likely to miss something. And that's one of the reasons I'm so excited about this research, is because we are doing this for a community that we are a part of and that we identify with. And so like the research matters to us a lot, but we also have insights that people from the outside might not have. And so we're really, really excited to share with you what we found. So we'll just skip on right next there. So the overall goal of this research is that we wanted to study the impact of COVID on the mental health of streamers. That's a big goal because obviously COVID is a big thing. And it made sense. Like, I'm seeing a lot of my friends. I'm talking to I'm talking to Jocelyn, I'm talking to the other Take This ambassadors. I'm looking at the streamers that I watch. And it just seemed like the amount of mental health content that was coming up either in their streams or people in the chat asking about them, or in the Twitch associated discords, the amount of discussion of like mental health stuff just anecdotally seemed like it was on the rise. And so what do? You science that. You have to go and, prove what you think you see. And so that's what we really wanted to do. And so, yeah, why do this? There are a couple of reasons other than we kind of see this anecdotal data. One of them is that being a streamer is stressful. Anybody who's tried to stream knows this. And so on one hand, it's stressful in general. Like, how many articles are out there about Polygon and Gamma Sutra about burnout in streamers and people being overworked and having like 60-hour work weeks just to make ends meet. Like, it's inherently a stressful field. And then if you want to look at the mental health of streamers, it's pretty much not studied at all. we really found, I think, only 1 or 2 articles in our literature review that actually addressed the mental health of streamers, as opposed to mental health content or the mental health of users, which there actually is a good research base for. There's actually a lot of research on why users watch, how users use Twitch, but not on the streamer themselves. And so that was really important to us. Second reason is that streamers provide really important social spaces. And during COVID, those social spaces online became invaluable. They became protective, bubbles for people to exist in and to connect and be socially close while being physically distant. And so, yeah, streams are community spaces. And these community spaces, as we have seen through psychological research throughout time, having community spaces where you feel a sense of connection can provide protective psychological effects during a crisis. And so we wanted to see, does that count even in a digital space? And I'll leave you hanging there because we'll get to the data and we'll let you know. And then last but not least is that access to mental health services really sucks. I say that as a provider. I know how hard it is to find mental health care. Especially in America, our insurance system is completely borked. There is a crisis in terms of the amount of mental health providers to compare to the need. We're talking like a huge, huge shortage and disparity, and it's only getting worse. And so what we're seeing is a lot of people are using Twitch as a way to get those mental health needs met. And, what impact does that have on a streamer who maybe didn't sign up to be, to lead like peer support, who maybe doesn't have the training or the background and never asked for this kind of stuff to come up. And so you can't ever blame someone for finding a way to get their needs met, but there's always going to be consequences. And we wanted to see what that was in this very particular space. So in terms of our methodology, and I promise this is kind of like the overview of the research, and then we're going to like dive into what we found and really start to discuss and break it apart.
It's going to get good. It's going to get good.
This is already good. We're talking methodology.
Sorry. What?
Don't worry. I pulled the stats section. I'm not going to go into p-values. Don't worry. I'm sorry.
P-values. Sorry.
Significance levels, they're important. It's science. It's science. But the general overview is that we recruited a bunch of streamers. We leveraged the networks that we have as streamers ourselves. So we're, reaching out to our own communities, mostly I'm not going to lie, again, Miss Mental Health herself on Twitch. And we were able to get 62 people to complete the survey screen, and 52 met criteria. So one of the criteria was you had to have been streaming for over a year, because we wanted to be able to compare pre-pandemic streaming to post-pandemic streaming. And so if you'd been streaming less than a year, you wouldn't really have that comparison. So if people didn't meet criteria, we said thank you. And going forward, we had 52 people who checked all the boxes. Of the 52, we had 23 who signed up to be interviewed, which is, we lost about half, but actually in research, that's not that unusual. That's actually a pretty good number. And of the 23 who signed up, 19 showed up. So of the original 62, we had 19. Not bad, not a huge number, but like for the kind of research we're doing, which is qualitative, that's actually a pretty big number. And so what we did, which is why 19 is a big number, is that we interviewed every single person and we asked them a series of questions. And once we interviewed them, we then transcribed every single word they said, read through those transcripts and analyzed the transcript for their thematic, it's called thematic analysis. So basically we're reading through these documents and pulling out themes that we're seeing. So some of our themes were, feeling overwhelmed, lack of resources, distress, other mental health topics that they came up. And so we're kind of coding them as we go. And then we take all of those codes and all that analysis and we translate it into a report that we then actually submitted and were accepted to for a publication that's coming out later this year that is focused on live streaming culture and being edited by some amazing names in games. So if you are a games scholar person, the names we're looking at are like Bo Ruenberg, so that's like, again, if you're a game nerd wonk like I am, it's like, oh my God, it's Bo. But if you're not, it's going to be cool. I'll just leave it at that. It's going to be cool. And so a little bit about the people that we actually interviewed, because that's an important part of understanding this cohort of individuals. So the majority of people that we talked to had been streaming for more than 3 years. And that's a long time to be streaming. And they had a lot of insight from pre-pandemic times to compare to post-pandemic times, which was great. And then pretty evenly split for the other half between 1 and 2 years and 2 and 3 years. So again, no one under 1 year because of, our conditions. And then we didn't track anything more than 3. So a pretty accomplished group of individuals here that we're working with. In terms of kind of what these streamers looked like, most of them had less than 1,000 followers, which again is pretty normal. But we did have a surprising amount of people with larger followings, between 1,000 and 5,000 people, making up, if you could put those two together, that was actually the majority of our participants. So not only do we have a lot of people who have been here for a while, we have people with a wide variety of experiences, from very small streams to very large streams, which was really amazing and really enriched the data. In terms of the gender breakdown, most of them identified as women, which is really, to me, just fascinating unto itself, because the majority of Twitch streamers are men. And so to have this kind of split, I think speaks to, it actually reminds me a lot of like the mental health field in general, which is about 80% women, even though most science fields are predominantly men. So obviously it's a matter of who we know and who's in our networks. And we're talking about mental health, which tends to be a more woman-dominated field anyway. But you can see that kind of breakdown there. And then last but not least, we wanted to share with you all the questions that we asked of our participants, because everybody got these 4 questions. And then we would follow up as needed for clarification, but we tried to keep it as standardized as possible. So the first one we asked was, what's it like being a streamer during COVID? Second one was, what's it been like for the community? And what has it been like for you as the leader of that community? Because those are 2 very separate questions, although they're related. What mental health resources do you use? Because we wanted to have a compendium of, what are streamers using? Like, are they going to NAMI? Are they going to Mental Health America? Do they know about the National Suicide Hotline? What resources are well known in the streamer space? And then also, what do they wish they had? Because one of the things we wanted to get out of this research was a streamer wish list of what are things that could be done better to support streamers as they're dealing with mental health stuff that comes up in their streams. And then last but not least, if there had been any ethical considerations around dealing with these topics, whether in their own streams, if they're watching other people's streams and how they're handling it. Ethics is, of course, always a very important thing to be mindful of. And because we're talking with people who are obviously deeply embedded in the community and this is what they're doing, it's a really good idea to see what's out there. Are there lines being crossed that as mental health professionals we should be aware of, that maybe as Twitch, as an organization should be aware of, and just kind of getting some feedback on that. And so I promise that's it in terms of our methodological section. And now we're going to dig into the results and really talk about what we found and what our takes were on those, given our unique backgrounds, but our commonality as streamers. And so the first result that, at least for me, this is probably one of the most impactful ones. Not really surprising, but just still kind of surprising, I guess, is that streamers serve as a frontline mental health responders. And I feel comfortable saying that as a licensed mental health professional. I feel totally comfortable saying that the stuff that streamers are going through, especially during the height of the pandemic, really mirrored my own experience as a therapist and as a clinician. And if you had told somebody, here's these lived experiences from people, but you didn't tell them whether they were a streamer or a therapist, I think you would be really, really hard pressed to figure out who was who. And so I want to pause here for a second and throw this to Jocelyn and to Em about your guys' thoughts on this idea of streamers as frontline mental health responders. Does that surprise you? Was that kind of like a no duh? What were your thoughts on that?
I think it was necessarily a no duh. I mean, I always have this idea, right? You always hear in terms of other types of media, people being like, this band saved my life, like this artist saved my life. So that idea of like being in a tough space and having like mental health, like, poor mental health, like stuff coming at you from every direction, and then having a person or a thing that you hold on to and that like gives you support, that foundation is already there, like societally. So then when you have this interactive component where you can chat with this person in real time and feel like they're responding to you and that you have this relationship with them, I think, you know, and we can talk about the ethical stuff later, but you get into this gray area where it's like, it's no longer you listening to a podcast and being like, this podcast saved my life. It's this person has reached out to me specifically in this moment of need and has like taken care of me. And in a certain way, that's like a very beautiful thing, because it's like human connectedness. And in another way, it's like, how much responsibility do you have as a streamer to like take care of your audience? Does this showcase shortcomings in mental health care? The answer is yes. And, you know, I don't think any of the things that we found were surprising. I just think that it was kind of like beneath the surface. And when I heard people talking about these things, I was like, oh, of course. But it hadn't occurred to me before then.
Mm-hmm.
One does not have to spend a lot of time on streamer Twitter. I'd say probably give it 2 weeks, maybe a month, depending on what cycle of discussion we are on. But having been on streamer Twitter for the past 3.5 years, I think the most common thing you see tweeted is, I am not your therapist.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is something that is very personal and but controversial. There's a lot of conversation in general in the streamer space of, I feel, I have community members coming at me with these mental health queries, and I am, one, not prepared to deal with them, and two, I don't want to deal with them because I want to hang out and entertain people and stuff. And so this question, asking this question, definitely gave us kind of confirmation of that, of seeing people say that, like, okay, I'm not your therapist. I don't want to be your therapist. I don't think there was one respondent who was like, yeah, I actually really enjoyed playing armchair expert here. So, it confirmed for me that, like, this is something that streamers struggle with. And I just, the evidence is there, and it is not something that you can deny anymore. Streamers encounter this, whether they like it or not. Streamers do end up being at the forefront of mental health and giving that mental health first aid, and whether they should or not is a whole separate question. But like Dr. Dunlap explained earlier, we do have a terrible mental health system, and so you have that parasocial relationship. Like you can't, you can't go to your favorite star, to quote Dr. Cowart, and you can't go to Henry Cavill and be like, hey, I'm having a bad day. But you can go to Pokimane and tell her you're having a bad day, right? And so it was very, very clear that the lines were blurred, and that streamers were having a hard time being setting those boundaries and focusing on, okay, what do I do and what am I not allowed to do? Because I don't want to overstep. Again, not one streamer said, yeah, I wanted to be a therapist, but I couldn't be. Like, every person was like, how do I do this the right way? And I know we'll talk about ethics later. But so no, it wasn't surprising to me, but I think this is, to me, data-wise, like, this was the most important question, because I feel like anecdotally we knew this, and now we had data to back it up, that, like, this is something that's happening and we need to do something about it so that streamers are not so scared and ill-prepared.
Yeah, it's always nice. It's always nice when the science backs up what you feel in your bones. Like, that's always a very nice thing. Go ahead, Jocelyn.
I was just going to say, I think it's also important to note that it might not be surprising to some people that people would come to UM for, like, mental health advice because you're a mental health streamer. But the fact that this is a unilateral problem for people who don't classify themselves as mental health advocates or streamers just shows how, like, deeply embedded the problem is.
Absolutely. And I know one of the things we found in the literature review for the start of this was, the idea of using a streaming space as a mental health space goes back to the very earliest days. Like, we can track it back to, like, Jenny Cam days in, like, the early 90s of people using internet broadcasting, it was the term back then, as a means for connecting emotionally with others and like living vicariously and having those parasocial relationships. And so to me, it's fascinating that, if you go from Jenny Cam days to now, that's 30 years. And the fact that we couldn't find any research, like 2 articles maybe, on the experience of streamers, and their own mental health and how they're dealing with the mental health and that emotional part. And it's mind blowing. Like, why not? Especially when there's a huge trove of research on users, but not on the streamers, which is always this interesting paradox. And, one last, or I guess not last thing, because we have another slide on this.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead. You go, you jump in. Yeah.
No. So I wanted to also make it super clear, kind of spoiler alert before we get to the end, because I don't want anybody to get upset. In no way, shape, or form are anybody here implying I know I butchered that grammatically. I'm really sorry. But in no way, shape, or form is anybody implying that streamers need to be first responders. The thing that we, because that is a huge responsibility and that you need to be trained to do, but it's happening. And that's the issue. Like, streamers are forced into this, and that's a problem. And now we have proof that that's the case. So now it's like, what do we do with this information?
Yeah. And it's not just because of COVID. COVID saw a spike in it.
Right.
But, this is something that has existed long before COVID, and that streamers have been managing for a long time. I mean, one thing that I also want to highlight is that listening to these conversations and listening to streamers talk about their experience. And of course, as a psychologist, I've been to 1,000, COVID mental health related talks and trainings and things like that. And the conversations that streamers and mental health providers are having are almost identical. Largely, at least around COVID, was how do I help other people through a trauma that I am currently experiencing myself? In the mental health profession, typically we don't do that. We may have had experience in the past that is similar to our clients, but we're typically not going through the exact same trauma that they are. And so that has been a huge discussion point in the mental health community of like, how am I present? How do I help my client dealing with isolation and COVID and, death of family members and separation and isolation when I am going through the exact same stuff right now. And I felt like that parallel to me was just really, really touching and emphasizes that this isn't just people talking about their feelings on stream. These are individuals, whether they want to be or not, being put in positions that are incredibly difficult, even for people like myself who have 5 years of doctoral training and another 4 years of practical training on top of that. And so to have none of that background and still show up every day to do this, it just like, it puts me in awe of streamers. And I think that that's a really important thing for us to realize as viewers, as other streamers, as entire platforms, that this is the work, this community work, this social space work is so important for streamers, even more so now than ever before. And I want to jump to one of the quotes. So one of the things when you do this kind of research is that you interview people and you pull their transcripts and you analyze what they've said. But then there's sometimes these quotes that just really jump out at you and kind of capture it. And so obviously everybody we interviewed is anonymous. And so they have a code. And so that's what you see here is M4. That just means that it's somebody that Mxiety interviewed. But what they said is that you've had this couple of community members and maybe you had to give a little extra TLC to, but now it's all your community members need that little extra TLC. And that just resonates so well of, there's always a person or two like, okay, you need a little extra care. But with COVID, suddenly everybody needs that extra care, including the streamer.
Yeah.
All right. Go ahead, Jocelyn.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think one of the interesting things too was, at least, I think this was pretty consistent. A lot of the streamers expressed that they felt responsibility to their communities to be that person for them. So kind of like Em was saying that this is something that's happening, streamers are basically on the front lines in that way. And it's kind of a universal response that it's like, well, this is my community. I take care of them. and then that puts people in a really hard spot where you don't know what you're doing and you're having like a lot of emotional stuff thrown at you.
Yeah. And that actually is the perfect transition into our second result, which was that streamers are struggling to find balance. And what that main takeaway was is I feel a sense of responsibility. I'm the leader of this community. People rely on me. I need to show up. These are my people. I have to take care of them, but I also have to take care of myself. And so there was a lot of, at least with the people I interviewed, a lot of pain around, I need a break. I'm so tired, but I don't feel like I can because these people need me more. And that is such a tough position to find yourself in. And yeah, so I want to open that up to you guys too. Like, is that kind of what you were saying, Jocelyn, is that finding that balance between what is my responsibility to my own self and my own mental health and the responsibility to taking care of this community of others?
Yeah, I mean, I just lost my entire train of thought.
Choo choo.
Oh no.
It's all good. It's because my words are so dazzling. They dazzle
so
them.
Amazing. I just completely. No, I mean, we had talked to a couple of people who had to take mental health breaks of their own. And they were like, I took X amount of time off because pandemic was hitting me hard, was hitting the community hard. And almost every single person, or maybe every single person who said that they had to take a break expressed guilt for not being there for their community and having to take like that time for themselves, which really just shows you like the scale of the problem, in that you have this person who's providing this service for these people, whether or not it's intentional. And then when they need to have a break, it's like a domino effect, and they're worried about the people in their community. And it was also really interesting to see the ways in which different streamers in their communities kind of were able to support each other in this time. But even so, it always was that feeling of talking to these streamers like, I'm just so burnt out, I don't know what to do, like I don't have any more to give.
Yeah. I mean, not research backed as much, but Dr. Dunlap did mention in the beginning, quite a few articles have been written about the fact that like streamers are just prone to burnout. It is not a profession that gives you vacation days. Yeah. It is a profession where I think, I'm going to butcher this, but Ninja, I think, said that he lost like 1,500 subscribers when he didn't stream for 2 days because he was at a convention. Like, this is typical stuff. Streamers feel like they have to be on, because if you're not on, then the community isn't there. If the community isn't there, and especially if this is your full-time job, then, you know, everything kind of, it's a domino effect. And so it's very, very obvious very quickly that when you're talking about something like COVID, and burnout is a prevalent topic around COVID, right? We've seen the articles about mental health providers burnt out, about medical providers being burnt out, just first responders, period, right? And essential workers. And so everybody, it's almost like a collective, you know, Earth's like trauma. And yeah, you just have to keep chugging along. And I know we're not talking about the rest of the world right now. We're talking about streamers, but it just goes to show that like it's not. I think maybe selfishly I want to talk about the fact that a lot of people believe that streaming is like super easy because you turned on a camera. And I think between the 7 million people who tried to stream and then quickly only 4 million streamed the month following the first month of the pandemic, I think those 3 million people quickly realized that, oh, this is not so easy. And figuring out this balance and figuring out people coming at you and having these conversations with you when you're dealing with this, you know, this multinational trauma. No, it's not easy. And struggling to find that balance, struggling to find where your boundaries lie. I think we didn't do a review of this, but I just, again, anecdotally feel like I heard the word boundaries so many times, right? Yeah. Both in the interviews, and that is backed by research, but also just like how many tweets, again, back on streamer Twitter, have I seen of people talking about, I need to learn to establish boundaries. I need to learn to establish that this is a parasocial relationship, that I am an entertainer. I am not, a parent. I do not have another responsibility to people who come and watch me in the community. And that is such a hard thing to do. I mean, I can talk about my experience, and my experience is that I came to streaming because I was struggling and I thought, hey, maybe I could help other people not struggle. And I believe that that is a common thread with a lot of mental health related streamers, and then people who end up talking about mental health just throughout their streams who might not be mental health advocates, but yeah, it's like hey, I had a bad day and I actually want to talk about it, kind of thing. And so finding those boundaries, I think, is critical to just no matter where you are. If you're streaming on the platform, finding balance is critical. And then you're talking about like international trauma on top of that. And like, whew.
Yeah, there was one of the interviews that I did, and the person I was interviewing, he's not a mental health streamer. He is purely an entertainment streamer. He does like DJ sets and he plays Halo. Like his entire thing is just being like this fun, chill community. And I will never forget him talking about like, I have worked so hard to bring the morale up and to have that sense of like happiness and that sense of comfort. And then someone comes in and trauma dumps or starts talking about whatever's going on in their life or going on with COVID. And then the mood just nosedives.
Mm-hmm.
And for him, the big balance was, where does my responsibility start and end? Because to him, his responsibility is to keeping the mood light. That was his goal. He wanted people to have a space to come to that wasn't about COVID, which is just as important. And so, but at the same time, he's like, I think he said, I don't want to be an ass. I think I can say ass. And just ignore somebody that needs help. Like I'd rather them say something than not. But as a streamer, being so frustrated by like, I just want to relax. This is my escape. This is how I'm processing. This is how I'm dealing. This is how I'm continuing to get social and emotional support in a way that, is for me. It's restorative for me. And then someone comes in with whatever's going on with them. I don't want to deal with that. And then feeling guilt about not wanting to deal with that. And it's so hard because I think back to my clinical training and, there are obviously, you take care of your clients and there are boundaries, but you're actually taught how to do that. And so for me, like when I'm done with clients, the day is over, the door is shut. And unless there's an emergency, like I get to go do my pastime and have fun. And that is not the case for a lot of streamers, where a lot of times streaming is their pastime. It is the place for them to have fun. And so if that also becomes a place where they're having to manage like real life issues, mental health issues coming up, especially if they don't want that, if they are just an entertainment, if they see that as their goal, then yeah, how do you find that balance between, I don't want someone to like be alone and to suffer, but like, how much am I willing to suffer because of it too?
Yeah.
And I think there's the thing of like, if you are not a streamer, you think of streaming as like maybe a couple hours on Twitch and then done. But there's Discord communities, there's social media. Like Em said, you're always on. And it's not like you turn off the stream and, you close the door and walk away, as you say. It's always there and always present. The story you told reminded me of an interview that I did, where the streamer was talking about they were in the middle of a stream and everything was going fine and the vibe was there, it was all good. And then someone started whispering to them about self-harm. And they just had to keep going like nothing was wrong while these messages are popping up saying these things that are like really heavy and deep, and like trying to, keep the stream going while directing a mod and being like, this person needs help and feeling responsible for that person, but then not being able to like, where is the boundary there? How do you establish that? And I think, that's something many people don't know how to do. And especially if you're an entertainer, it's very hard to establish like, where does my responsibility end to my community?
Yeah. And I think this quote that we have up here speaks a lot to that of, I need the same support. And in some ways I need a little bit extra because I'm trying to help a community and myself and going through all those things this year at the same time. So that just echoes everything that we've been saying in terms of, finding the balance between being there for the community, but taking care of ourselves, recognizing that we need our own care, we need our own time. And the idea of like, you are going through the same trauma that everyone else is going through at the same time while they're going through it. And that is a monumentally difficult, if not impossible task. But streamers are carrying it. That's what they're doing. And yeah, Em, did you want to add anything before we go on to result number 3?
No, I've said my piece. No, I really do. I feel good about this one.
Okay. So the third thing we found was that streamers are unsupported and unprepared to address mental health. And so I want to be very clear. I am not blaming streamers. We are not blaming streamers. What lights my rage fires and keeps my hair red is in every one of these interviews, because even though we each interviewed about a third, but then went through and read all the transcripts. So I read every single transcript of every single person. And the thing that lit my rage fires was that every single streamer was doing all of their own legwork. Every single one of them had set up their own Discord resources. They had done their own research. They had done their own Googling. And it makes me so angry because it is such an utter failure of the mental health system and of the platform system. So in this case, Twitch, there is absolutely no reason someone should have to go and make their own mental health list. And we're not talking specializations. We're talking like the suicide prevention hotline and, just super basic resources that are out there. And so, yeah, that just made me so incredibly angry because as a clinician, I know there's all these resources. There's hotlines, there's warm lines, there's peer support. I know how to get people, navigate them through an insurance process. I know how to find a therapist. Like I have all this information. And the fact that there's just this massive disconnect between the institutional knowledge of mental health professionals and people who genuinely need it because they are in the literal trenches. It keeps me up at night. It makes me so genuinely angry.
I actually had a discussion with a few people at Twitch, and the thing that I keep saying, because again, I read all these interviews too, and while it is very, very sweet and so kind that people would go, oh, I didn't know what the resources are, so I asked Mxiety. So sweet, so kind. But
very common. Very common.
But lights my fire the same way as it does Dr. Dunlap, because that should not be happening. You should not be you should not have to know about a mental health advocate on the platform because I'm on Twitter and YouTube and you see my face everywhere. And so that's what you think of before you think of NAMI and Take This and every, the suicide hotline. That should not be what's happening. I don't.
And it's also not fair to you.
But it's
because that puts such a burden on you.
No, but I that's one of my goals is to make people aware of resources. So yes, it's a burden, but it's kind of like complaining that I'm wearing the color green. I put it on myself, So it's not that. I'm ready. I love giving people resources. I have them. They're all on my website. At the drop of a hat, I have all the buttons on my stream deck. My mods know all the all the commands and stuff. They're in chat. They're in underneath in my panels. They're all there, and I want you to come and get them. And if you get them from me and you get them nowhere else, I'm grateful. I'm grateful that you came and you looked for them. That's it. I want that to be the case, right? But I also don't want that to be the case because I don't, I think when you think of mental health, I think this is actually a larger issue of stigma. It's not just the platforms and everything. When you think of mental health, I want you to think of NAMI, MHA, mind.org, Take This, Safe in Our World. That's what all the other amazing charities that they're falling off of my head. But all the amazing resources that are out there, the suicide hotline, crisis text line, veterans text line, those are all on my site, and it's awesome. Again, sure, give me those Google views, awesome. But I want people to know what they are, and I want people to have a common space. And if I'm the common space. Great. I'm happy you have a space. But I strongly, like, looking at this, my heart broke as people were like, yeah, so I either did the research myself, or I went to Mxiety, or I went to another mental health advocate, or I just started Googling and hoped I found the right resource, which is something that I heard, which scared the Jesus out of me.
Absolutely.
I was like, oh no. I mean, because the resources are there. There are amazing gaming, like, again, I'm Name Safe in Our World. Take this, like, these are amazing gaming charities that have more resources on their sites that are international and stuff that will lead you to other spaces, because obviously Twitch is international. And so I like, that's what should be coming off the top of your head. That's what, when people say, when somebody comes in and you are faced with the really scary question of, I feel like hurting myself. Now you tell me what to do, streamer, that I feel like I have a relationship with. I want you to be able to shout out off the top of your head, like, oh, Safe in Our World has a great website. National Crisis Text Line, do it right now. You know, or National Suicide, games and online harassment hotline. Can't believe I almost forgot them. Amazing resource created by psychologists. Like, just, there's so much out there, and I want you to know what those resources are. And I think I'm running to the conclusion. I'm sorry, I've been rambling for a while, but I want those to be accessible. Like, I want, when you type in Twitch mental health, I want the first thing that comes up is a list of resources. And the funny thing is, everybody I interviewed, not one person, when I said, oh, the Twitch Cares page exists, not one person said, really? Like, not one person was like, oh yeah, I know about that. Every person said, really? That's a thing?
My favorite thing is when I brought that up, I believe the quote was, what the F is Twitch Cares?
Yeah, we had that. It was Cody.
Yeah. And especially considering that, and just on that alone. So yes, Twitch has a page that has actually a really good list of mental health resources. But, you know, in the name of science, I decided to see how many clicks it takes to get there. It takes 6 clicks through submenus that make no sense whatsoever.
That's like
in order to find
your
it.
Amazon.
Yeah,
it is. You know, we have a term for that in design. We call them dark design patterns, because you make it difficult for people to find where they're trying to get to. So I'm not saying Twitch is doing that on purpose, but like,
it could be
better.
Why
is it a higher priority?
Yeah.
Why is it buried in 6 submenus? I don't.
Right.
You know, you can have the cure for cancer, but if no one can find it, then it doesn't really do anything. So yeah, that's something, like, just bump it to the front. Why is there not just a direct link? I don't know. Go ahead.
And I've said this before, that like Twitch has done a really good job, like compared to when I started, Twitch has done a really good job raising mental health awareness, and they do Mental Health Action Day, and in May they acknowledge mental health streamers, and in October they acknowledge mental health streamers, in September like they do have little spaces where they elevate. So let's do a little bit more, right? Like, it's already happening. So why don't we, like, when you post and you say, like, here's October 10th, here's all the streamers who we're highlighting for World Mental Health Day. Also, we have a Twitch Cares page. Just tweet that out too, you know? Yeah. So it's like, I think it's simpler than it can. It's harder than it should be, and it's simple. It is a lot more simple than we make it out to be.
Yeah, I mean, I think we talked about in our paper, like, what about when someone reaches affiliate or partner? How about sending them that information then? Or even when you start streaming on Twitch, you get all these like intro videos on like how to set up your camera and how to do this. Why not? And here's Twitch Cares. Just in case you start running into this stuff. Yeah,
just the link. You don't have to, like, you can even put on it like, hey, this does not make you a mental health professional.
Yeah.
This is just resource. There's this fear, and it is definitely stigma produced, that like, if people know about resources and then they do something wrong, then you will legally be responsible for it. But like, there's protections for that too. Like, you have lawyers. I know Twitch has lawyers, you know, like you can put the language there so that people know, like, hey, I'm not a doctor just because I read this Twitch Cares document. I'm sure that is not that hard to do. So I understand I also want to acknowledge that it is a sticky, weird space. And that's partly due to stigma, and that's a whole separate conversation. But like, COVID's still happening, and this is still happening, and there's easy ways to just elevate this a little bit.
Yeah. And I mean, kind of talking about the sticky space as well, we've all seen there are people who are mental health advocates or mental health professionals who are in this space who are doing things unethically and, you know, doing things the wrong way. And so I'm sure there's some like behind the scenes conversations where it's like, we don't want any part of that. We don't want to encourage people to then become like Twitch therapists. But I think the thing is, it is infinitely better to have marginally better equipped streamers who are already doing this work, to give them the resources that they need so that they can set the boundaries for themselves and that they can direct people to the appropriate resources, than it is to withhold that information because of whatever reason and have them continue doing this work without those resources. That is incredibly, like, the potential for harm is so much greater without those resources. I know in a couple of my interviews, and maybe in a couple of your guys' interviews too, I can't remember, but there were a couple of people who were like, I Googled, you know, and I didn't know what was what. So I just basically collected all of the different suicide hotline numbers in all of these different countries, and I put them in a Discord channel, or I have a Discord channel where people can just talk, and then I will have a mod like swoop in and talk to somebody one-on-one if it seems like they're having like a really bad day or need help. And those are great things, but like the suicide hotline is a one very specific, at a very specific moment resource, and there's so much more out there. I wish there were more, but there's already a lot out there. It's just the visibility of those things is not there. And I think,
to your point about the suicide hotline, most people don't know that you don't have to be suicidal to call.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have, you know, in my pre-doctoral days, I was really worried about a friend. So I called the hotline because I was worried about a friend, and I talked to somebody to help my friend get support. Or if you're just feeling overwhelmed, but there's this idea of, well, I'm not suicidal.
Hello?
You know, when we're talking about Twitch Cares and it being buried and this onus being on the streamers to provide, why isn't there a check-in button? Why isn't there a universal command? Because I know Twitch has those, where it just brings up the Twitch Cares page. Like, why is it on streamers to go through and find that? Why is it the streamers' due diligence to, you know, collect these things when you could just super easily have them readily accessible? And again, you can't be held liable for having a list of resources. Like, you can't.
That's a Google search, you know?
Yeah.
It's kind of like, it reminds me of like how there's an implication that like if we teach kids sex ed, they're going to have more sex.
Right.
It's kind of like that. Like, no, they're doing it. You should help them do it in a safe way. I think this research shows that like this is happening. We don't want it to happen. Streamers don't want anything to do with it, but it's happening. So let's arm them and help them. Again, I cannot make this clear enough. Not become, you know, Twitch therapists, but become ready to know, hey, I probably should have condoms on hand. Just saying. Okay.
I'm glad we included condoms in our conversation, because safe sex is important, kids.
All right. Well, you know, we talked about p-values. It's only natural we get to condoms. I'm still embarrassed that I said that, but now that we brought in condoms, I feel a little bit better. Anyway, there was a brief pause, and I'm really sorry about that because of there was an internet break on my end, but everything's fine. Great. Next slide.
So yeah, this next slide here, just kind of summing up what we've been talking about. This one was someone that I interviewed, and this string of conversation like nearly broke me. But the highlight was, you know, it keeps me up at night. The idea of like having these resources and knowing how to respond, because I'm not a professional and I'm constantly paranoid about putting somebody in danger just because I don't know. I'm just so scared of just doing the wrong thing because I know that this is such a delicate subject and it shouldn't be handled so lightly. And so people literally like having their own mental health worsen because they are so afraid of accidentally hurting someone, when that is a completely avoidable state. You know, if there was that universal command for, okay, Twitch Cares, you know, and it just auto popped up, or, you know, whatever, just built into someone's stream, then you don't have to worry, because literally like everything on there is as much as you would expect anybody on Twitch to do. And as I always like to say, I am a therapist. but I'm not your therapist. And when I'm on Twitch, I can never forget the fact that whatever I say, no matter how many disclaimers I have, anything I say can be taken as clinical advice. And so that can also hold true for people who are mental health advocates or who are just willing to talk about this kind of stuff, is that even with disclaimers, if people need support, they're going to go find it. And regardless of what you say or regardless of your credentials, it can be taken as, professional advice. So why not offload that stress? Why not allow people to, have, obviously mental health access would be best, but it's still, to me, it just shouldn't be on streamers. They didn't ask for this. They didn't sign up for this. They didn't go to school for this. It shouldn't be on them. But here we're seeing the direct negative mental health impacts of streamers who are confronted with this kind of stuff on their streams. And so I want to do a quick time check.
Yeah, we gotta run.
We gotta move.
10 minutes. 10 minutes.
Okay.
We're all talkers.
Okay. All right. So the last result. So we have one more result, then we're going to go into our recommendations. So the last result here was that streamers in their communities are resilient, which is nice to have like a positive thing to end on.
Yeah.
Every single one that I did, it ended with, it's really hard, but we're closer, but we're more supportive, but we're coming out stronger on the other side, which, I'm not a big fan of positive psychology, silver lining, kind of fluffy, toxic positivity. But it was very clear that despite the difficulties, people were coalescing, which is what we see outside of digital spaces too during times of crisis, is people come together. They need that sense of connection and support, and to have like this be a shared experience as opposed to their own individual trauma. And so it was really wonderful to see streamers talk about how they felt like their communities have rallied and how they've become closer and people have become more open. And so those are at least some positives that have come out of this. And so, yeah, I'll toss it to you guys, and I know we're short on time.
Yeah, I just, I'll try and keep it brief, but there's one story. And again, all of these things, it's like a double-edged sword. They're like, these are beautiful stories of resilience and stuff, but it's heartbreaking that they had to happen.
Right.
But there was one person I interviewed who one of their mods passed away. And
oh, that one. Yeah.
Yeah. And so they organized a kind of like memorial service in Animal Crossing, and people just come to the island and they'd run around and do things and talk. And, it wasn't like they could go to the funeral of this person. None of them had met them in real life, but they all just kind of came together as a community and grieved together and talked together and like shared that moment in a way that's like very human. I don't know. And I think, again, so like awful that had to happen. And also like how great a solution to just be like, let's just run around in Animal Crossing and be sad together.
Yeah. I mean, that's the perfect example of people getting their needs met. And it doesn't matter whether it's an online space or not. And so this community came together, they coalesced to grieve the loss of someone who was important to them. And they did it in a way that is uniquely gamer, uniquely streamer. But yeah, like it's heartbreaking and also heartwarming at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah. The only thing I'm going to say to this is I love my community. I love my Sparks. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for hanging in there for the past, 3.5 years of having these conversations. But like, for, especially during the times of COVID, y'all are so resilient. And I'm so, so grateful to have all of you.
So now we're at the crying section.
I know. I'm like, woo!
We haven't even gotten to the quote, which was, I think we've all been learning just not to take each other for granted and to be a little bit kinder to one another, because we're all just dealing with the unimaginable. And I don't know about you guys, but I always get teary-eyed reading that because I instantly think of Hamilton.
I know, I was going to say it.
and going through the unimaginable song, which always brings tears to my eyes. And like, there's just something so fundamentally human about that shared experience, that communal experience. And like supporting each other through a difficult time, which if you were to bring up, like, I can't tell you how many talks I've been on, in the past years about how streaming is bad, games are bad, online interactions are toxic and evil, and all they do is steal our children. And then these are stories you don't hear. These are the things that aren't told. And I was like, y'all need to hear these stories because literally people are surviving through these kinds of communities.
It's pretty cool.
Okay. All right. Now we're good. We're going to move on. We're gonna move on to-
Recommendations.
All right. So this is our streamer wish list. This was comprised of when we asked streamers, what do you wish you had? If you had a magic wand and you could have like anything to help support you in terms of either improving your own mental health as a streamer or being better able to manage mental health as it comes up in your stream, what do you want? And so the first thing that came up was this idea of making it easier to connect and share mental health resources. We've already talked about this
Right.
in one of the previous themes of everybody's having to make their own list. There is no centralized hub for this information. And one of the most fascinating things I found, and I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on this too, is that most people don't trust Twitch. And so I would say something like, okay, well, what if Twitch had a repository? And, you know, leading into the idea that Twitch Cares exists. And I had so many people go, I wouldn't trust anything that Twitch put out there.
Yeah,
Twitch would
someone
need
laughed.
to yeah, someone laughed.
Yeah.
Like it's ha 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 in the transcript. And so it's either been they need to partner with somebody like a National Alliance on Mental Illness, which is NAMI, Mental Health America, which is MHA, or like a Stack Up or a Take This, you know, a mental health org dedicated to gamers, to feel confident that would be acceptable. The second most common thing was I just go to other streamers, and that's where M's name got listed like 5,000 times.
Yeah. Oh my God. So many times.
You know how scary it is reading a transcript and being like, and anxiety. And I literally was like reading things and going, no. Do not rope me into this. Do not. But like, again, it's very sweet. And I acknowledge that, but like.
It is sweet, but it definitely shows like, the lack that is there.
It's a gap.
You know?
It's a
Yeah.
gap. It's a gap that needs to be filled, not by one little tiny little blonde girl. Thank you.
But you do it so well. But yeah, just the ability to more easily share resources. Again, whether that's Twitch sending out an email when you sign up or make partner or affiliate. I personally would love to see the mental health organizations get off their butts and do something about this. This is not anything new, but it like, I literally went to a conference on ethics in media for psychologists, and I asked a question about Twitch, and none of the expert panelists even knew what Twitch was. And I asked about a Twitter. I said about, you know, like I see something unethical and I want to inform, but I'm afraid if I confront this person, I'm going to get a Twitter mob sent after me. Not only did they not know what Twitch was, they didn't know what a Twitter mob was.
Oh my God.
And so these are experts in our field, and they just don't know. So I want to see like game specific and not having to do with addiction, all that other BS. That is a total other rant. But like streamers are doing this work. We have proof here that like people are getting their needs met here. Why aren't we seeing support from the organizations to support streamers, to support to support Twitch? You know, why aren't we making this easier?
3 minutes.
3 minutes. Okay.
Yeah.
So recommendation number 2, alternatives to hotlines and links. Again, one of the most heartbreaking things I heard was people are tired of being sent to a hotline. Like that is quote verbatim. I could have that tattooed on me. That's how sure I am. That's what they said. And I get that. Nobody wants to hear like, well, this is where you go. But at the same time, like, what else do you want streamers to do? They're not therapists. And even if they are therapists, they're not your therapist.
Yeah.
So there needs to be awareness around things like warm lines, peer support, local connections. Like these are resources that we need to have more of. And again, I will totally throw it at the feet of mental health professionals of like, we need to recognize that streaming is an important place where people are having mental health conversations. We can't pretend like this doesn't exist. So like we need to get off our keisters and have more of those, at least the resources that are out there, make them more visible, make them easier to find, let people know that they exist. Because again, you can have a resource, but if people don't know it exists, then what's the point in having it?
Yeah. And I think it's helpful to think in terms of numbers, like how many 4 million streamers on Twitch with how many more million people in their communities who they're talking to and having these conversations. That's a lot of people. And that is a lot of people getting shuttled off to a hotline, you know? I think that people outside the gaming space don't realize just truly the massive reach that streamers have, and that this is so necessary and needed in this space.
Yep. I'm screaming from the rooftops. I literally did a training like earlier this month about games and them being social spaces for getting mental health needs met. And people stare at me like I have 10 eyeballs. And I'm like, well, this is the truth, people.
Listen, but you're talking to like a whole like society that is so behind that is still like Fortnite is making my child crack addicted. Like that,
Yeah.
you know, like that's where we are, how far behind. So for you to be like, okay, it's good. And then not only is it good, but we need to help people get them that's like 5 steps right there that you're just skipping. That
My backpack is heavy. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah.
All right. And so for the last recommendation, as we wrap up here, streamers were asking for more psychoeducation training and professional support. So psychoeducation is the psycho jargon word for they want more information and education specifically around mental health topics. So whether those are webinars or, you know, trainings that they can take, like more than just mental health first aid, which is wonderful, by the way. Like I think mental health first aid is fantastic.
Cannot
I think people
recommend
should take
it
just
enough.
like,
take
it like you would CPR training. I think that's important to have. But like, you know, what do you do if someone comes into your stream and they want to, and they start talking about self-harm? What if they come in and they're trauma dumping? Like there's a real hunger for information and wanting these resources, and having them come from professionals. Like I heard that all the time is, I wish I had a mental health professional to talk to, not because for my own therapy, but because I want to know if I handled this right. I want to know if I gave the right resource. Like people want that reassurance, but there's so few people who are mental health trained, whether they're advocates or professionals, that are in this space. There's a hell of a lot more advocates than you know, people like myself. And they want that validation. They want the support because they want to do right by their communities because they're inherently good human beings.
Hell yeah.
So yeah, that is I'm sure that's our time. Hopefully we have respected that limit. Obviously this is recorded. And so we will be doing, obviously, hopefully Q&A as is going on, you know, doing like director's cut or Mystery Science Theater 3000 style in the Discord, but that's going to wrap it up for us. And we will be around. I'm going to assume that we're going to be around in the Discord chat to answer any more follow-up questions. And so as we log off, just want everyone to have a chance to, you know, find us and what's going on. So for example, again, my name is Kelly Dunlap and you can find me on Twitter at Kelly N Dunlap. That's Kelli, the letter N, and then DUNLAP. I live on Twitter, so you can find me and all of my stuff there. And what about you?
All right. So again, if you are like, hey, I don't know where resources are and I want a lot of them at once, Mxiety.com is a place for you to go, and I'm very, very happy to continue collecting resources there. So that's the place to go. If you want to find me personally, I also live on Twitter. My schedule is on Twitter. All the recent stuff that I'm doing is there. I stream at least twice a week on Twitch. I am a Twitch partner. You can also Google Marie Shanley. I've written a book about my experiences. So if any of that interests you, and of course, like stop by the stream, check out my Twitch channel. It has a schedule on it and everything. And I do hope to see you there, and I promise my community will have you there with open arms.
They are so precious.
They're so
precious
wonderful.
beings.
Yesterday there was like a 10-minute hug break where everybody just hugged each other in chat. It was amazing. Okay,
That's so sweet.
They're wonderful beings.
Love that.
Okay, sorry, Jocelyn, go.
Oh, it's all good. So you can find me on Twitter and Twitch at Curious Whims. That's curious with a K, WHIMS. And I also am on Twitter a lot. I maybe don't live on Twitter, but I am on Twitter a lot. It's a good way to get a hold of me. So.
All right. Well, thank you, Em. Thank you, Jocelyn. And thank you to everybody who's tuned in for our chat. We'll be happy to answer any questions. Thank you. So now we can have a group hug. Because we process through all the feelings. And yeah, so just be wonderful to one another. And I have a button that says mental health effing matters, but I wasn't going to wear it because no one could read it. So just remember, that's your takeaway. Mental health effing matters.
It still does matter. Love you.
Yeah.
Bye. Be the light.
Bye, Al.